Stop. Before you watch this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on.
I've got time.
Steve Jobs is a very interesting and creative person.
Get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen.
And is often called a genius and a revolutionist for everything he has done. He has changed the entire world through his ideas and visions, and because of this, Steve Jobs was able to become a famous and successful entrepreneur. However, there is always a story behind success, and that is what we are going to talk about in this video. Sit back, relax, and watch. Steve Jobs wouldn't have been the person he is today if the events that took place in his childhood hadn't have happened. Steve Jobs was born in San Francisco, California on February 24, 1955. He was born to unmarried parents and shortly after had to be signed up to adoption as the mother's family objected to the relationship. Steve Jobs was then adopted by Clara Jobs and Paul Jobs, who took an oath that Steve Jobs would be well educated. In 1957, Paul and Clara Jobs adopted a new child, Patricia Ann Jobs, who would become Steve Jobs' sister. At the age of 5, the family moved houses from San Francisco to Mountain View, California. When Steve Jobs had entered school, he had difficulty learning and would frequently misbehave. He was even suspended a few times. However, this all came to a stop when his 4th grade teacher bribed Steve into learning. The teacher said, "I really want you to finish this workbook. I'll give you $5 if you finish it." This made him behave better and learn more. Steve Jobs later acknowledged her for doing this, and he stated,
She watched me for about 2 weeks, and she then approached me. She said, "Stephen, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I have this math workbook, and if you take it home and finish it on your own without any help, and you bring it back to me, if you get it 80% right, I will give you $5. It was really quite wonderful, and I think I probably learned more academically that 1 year than I've ever learned in my life. When I got out of 4th grade, they tested me and they decided to put me in high school. And my parents said no, thank God. They said he can skip 1 grade, but that's all.
Steve Jobs had to transfer to Crittenden Middle School, where he was labeled as a socially awkward loner. In 7th grade, Steve got bullied regularly and gave his parents an option: either transfer me into a new school or I will drop out. His parents then used up all their life savings to purchase a new house in Cupertino, California. This place had a higher population of engineering families than Mountain View did, which made it an excellent place to learn about technology. In 1968, Jobs attended to the high school Homestead High along with his friend Bill Fernandez. In the first year at the school, Fernandez introduces Jobs to Steve Wozniak, which played a crucial role in the uprising of Apple. Neither Jobs nor Fernandez had a background in engineering, so they enrolled in John McCollum's Electrics 1 class. Jobs had grown his hair long and was involved in the counterculture, which led to a loss of interest with the electronics class. During the mid-1970s, Steve went through a massive change. He was introduced to classic literature like Shakespeare and Dylan Thomas, and read books like Moby Dick and took creative writing classes. He also began to listen to music more and explore literary works beyond science and technology. In the last 2 years at Homestead High, Jobs had developed an interest in electronics and literature. Steve Jobs' classmate described him as kind of brain and kind of hippie, but he never fit in either group. He was smart enough to be a nerd but wasn't nerdy, and he was too intellectual for the hippies who just wanted to get wasted all the time. He was kind of an outsider. In high school, everything revolved around what group you were in, and if you weren't in a carefully defined group, you weren't anybody. He was an individual in a world where individuality was suspect. In September of 1972, Jobs enrolled at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. He insisted on applying only to Reed, although it was an expensive school that Paul and Clara could barely afford. After he just finished his first semester, Jobs dropped out of Reed College without informing his parents. He later explained this was because he did not want to spend his parents' money on an education that seemed meaningless to him. Jobs didn't like how he had to attend the required classes, so he decided to go to the classes he liked, including calligraphy. In 1972, Steve Wozniak had created a blue box telephone. These were blue boxes that allowed people to get free cell service illegally, and Jobs decided that they could sell it. They made an estimated $6,000 in profits, but had to shut down as they almost had the police called on them. Jobs said if it weren't for that blue box, there would be no Apple. Steve Jobs said this blue box symbolized to him that they could compete against large companies and beat them. In February of 1974, Steve Jobs was hired by Atari Inc., a video game developer and a home computer company, as a technician. What's interesting about this is that in 1973, Wozniak had designed his own version of the game Pong and gave the circuit board to Jobs, and Jobs then showed the circuit board to the company and they thought he had built it himself and hired him. Steve Jobs saved up his earnings from working at Atari to go on a trip to India for spiritual enlightenment. After saving enough money, Jobs had traveled to India in 1974 to visit Nim Baba, along with his other friend. However, when they visited, they found out he was dead. Steve Jobs didn't let this stop him and still searched for spiritual enlightenment. He later found another person to help him. Jobs left India after staying there for 7 months and returned to the US. At that time, Jobs had begun experimenting with psychedelics, which are a type of hallucination drugs. He described his experience with LSD as one of the 2 or 3 most important things done in life. Jobs had also become very engaged in Zen Buddhism and frequently meditated. He was also living in his parents' backyard in a shed at that time. In 1975, there was a club called the Homebrew Computer Club, which was an early computer hobbyist group in Menlo Park, California. Jobs and Wozniak attended the meetings of the club, and this was a huge start in the rising of Apple. In March of 1976, Wozniak had created his own computer called the Apple I, which he showed to Jobs at the Homebrew Computer Club. Jobs saw potential in Wozniak's invention and convinced him to start a company to sell it. On April 1st of the same year, Jobs, Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne founded Apple Computer Company as a California business partnership. Wayne became a co-founder in return for 10% stake. On April 12th, less than 2 weeks after the company's formation, Wayne had left Apple and sold his shares back for $800. The Apple business started in Jobs' bedroom and later moved to his garage, which would be known as the Apple Garage. According to Wozniak, Jobs proposed the name Apple Computer when he came back from Robert Friedland's all-in-one farm in Oregon. Jobs said the name sounded fun, spirited, and not intimidating. Plus, it would get us ahead of Atari in the phone book. Jobs planned to produce bare-printed circuit boards of Apple I and sell them to computer hobbyists for $50, which is equal to $240 in today's money. The two Steves made a last trip to the Homebrew Computer Club and demonstrated the Apple I. Paul Terrell, who operated the computer store chain Byte Shop, was impressed. The next day, Jobs visited Terrell at the Mountain View Byte Shop store and tried to sell him the circuit boards for the Apple I. Terrell said he was only interested in purchasing the machine fully assembled, and that he would order 50 assembled computers and pay $500 each on delivery. Jobs talked to Kramer Electronics, which was a distributor of electronic components at that time, and ordered the components needed. After some back and forth, Jobs was able to get the deal going. Jobs and Wozniak and their small crew worked day and night building and testing the computers. They managed to deliver them on time. Terrell was surprised to receive a batch of assembled circuit boards, as he had expected complete computers with a case, monitor, and keyboard. He kept his word and paid them the money as promised. A neighbor called Jobs as an odd individual who would greet his clients with his underwear hanging, barefoot and hippie-like. Jobs' friend from Reed College in India, Daniel Kotke, said that as an early Apple employee, Jobs was the only person who worked in the garage. Wozniak showed up once a week with his latest code. Daniel also said that much of the early work took place in Jobs' kitchen, where he spent hours on the phone trying to find investors for the company. Steve Jobs worked day and night calling investors for Apple, but none of them had accepted. Because of that, Wozniak had to sell his HP scientific calculator, and Jobs sold his van to help with the company. Later on, Apple received funding from a then semi-retired Intel product marketing manager and engineer Mike Markkula. He invested $250,000 for 1/3 of Apple. If the investment was kept, he would have about $900 billion as of right now. One of the co-founders of Sun Microsystems said that Jobs broke a glass-age ceiling in Silicon Valley because he created a very successful company at a young age. Markkula brought Apple to the attention of Arthur Rock, which after looking at the crowded Apple booth at the Homebrew Computer Show, started with a $60,000 investment and went on the Apple board. In February of 1977, Apple needed a president and a CEO as Jobs and Wozniak were insufficiently experienced and were not interested in taking that position themselves. Markkula recruited Michael Scott from National Semiconductor. Jobs was not pleased when he recruited him. In the same month, Wozniak resigned from his job to work full-time for Apple. Almost as soon as Apple began selling its first computers, Wozniak moved on from the Apple I and began designing a greatly improved computer, the Apple II. During the development, Jobs wanted a well-designed plastic case and built-in keyboard, with the thought of a machine would be fully packaged and ready to run out of the box. Jobs hired an industrial designer named Jerry Manock to design such case. In April 16th and 17th of 1977, Jobs and Wozniak introduced the Apple II at the West Coast Computer Fair. This was the first consumer product that was sold by Apple Computer. The Apple II became one of the first highly successful mass-produced microcomputer products in the world. The Apple II went on sale in June 10, 1977 with a price of $1,298. The computer had a redesigned TV interface that held the display in memory. This allowed for the computer to have graphics and later on, color. The early models used ordinary cassette tapes as storage devices, but later used 5 1/4-inch floppy disk drive called the Disk II. This system was designed by Wozniak and was priced at $495. At the young age of 23, Jobs had a net worth of over $1 million, which is equivalent to $4.15 million today. By age 25, his net worth grew to an estimated $250 million, which is equivalent to $745 million in today's money. That's almost $1 billion for a 25-year-old. Jobs had also appeared on the Forbes list of the nation's wealthiest people. Jobs and John Sculley met each other after Thanksgiving in 1982, and John was the CEO of Pepsi at that time. Jobs and John got together every weekend for 5 months as Jobs was trying to convince Sculley to take a job at Apple. In April of 1983, Jobs asked Sculley, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world?" This made John leave and become president and CEO of Apple. When he was CEO, Apple went from having revenues of $569 million to $8.3 billion. This video took me a long time to make and a lot of hard work and research. To help support me, I recommend you like this video, comment about your opinion, share to your friends, and subscribe. The more likes I get, the faster the second part will come out. See you, and this is Wonixer.
Subscribe to Wonixer.